You know, usually when you walk into a museum, there's this expectation of absolute truth.
Right, yeah.
Like you look at a marble statue, you read the little bronze plaque beneath it, and you just trust it. I mean, it's history. It's solid.
It feels carved in stone, quite literally.
Yeah.
It's deeply comforting for us to have the past neatly categorized and, officially verified.
But then you realize that the plaque might have been written by the person who stole the marble.
Right.
Or the person who murdered the sculptor.
Right.
And suddenly, that museum feels less like an objective record of facts and a lot more like a crime scene.
Where the perpetrator got to write the official police report.
Exactly.
That is the perfect way to describe historical vertigo. It is that exact moment when the ground of truth just drops completely out from under you.
And that feeling of vertigo is exactly what we are exploring with you today. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled you're joining us.
We really are.
Because we are looking at a massive, sweeping document we've sourced, titled Political Lies That Changed History. And our mission today is to explore a fairly mind-blowing reality.
Which is that human history hasn't just been written by the victors.
Right.
It has been written by the most effective liars.
It's wild.
It really requires a profound shift in perspective. Like when you read through these sources, you realize that a political lie's power rarely comes from how believable it is.
Yeah.
Its power comes from how incredibly useful it is to the person telling it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer volume of the source material we have today is staggering. I mean, we are spanning from ancient Egypt all the way to the Second World War.
It's a huge timeline.
Yeah, so to make any sense of it, we aren't just going to list off events. We want to categorize these historical fictions to understand the mechanisms.
Exactly.
Like, why do leaders deceive, and how do these lies quite literally shape the reality you and I live in today?
And it is crucial to establish our framework right up front. As we look at these events, and we will be looking at left-wing systems, right-wing systems, democracies, monarchies, our goal here is entirely impartial analysis.
Right, we aren't taking any political sides.
Not at all. We are simply dissecting the mechanics. We want to understand how narratives are weaponized to control populations and justify power, regardless of who is holding the weapon.
Exactly. So let's start at the absolute foundation. Before a leader can abuse their power or weaponize a narrative, how do they convince people to hand over that power in the first place?
You have to establish a right to rule.
Right.
You do. And the ancient Egyptian pharaohs were honestly the absolute masters of fabricating this legitimacy.
Okay.
They didn't just claim to be appointed by the gods. They fabricated the entire concept of divine kingship. They claimed the pharaoh was the falcon god Horus incarnate.
Hold on. I've always wondered about this. Did the average person actually believe the guy sitting on the throne was a literal bird god? Or was it like just symbolic?
Well, the sources suggest it was treated as a literal cosmic reality.
Wow.
And it wasn't just an ego trip for the pharaoh either. It had a massive economic mechanism behind it. By claiming to be a god, the pharaoh could command corvée labor.
Which is what, exactly?
Essentially forced unpaid labor by the masses to build those monuments. But they didn't frame it as economic exploitation.
Of course not.
They framed it as a sacred duty to maintain cosmic order, a concept they called Ma'at.
Right.
So if you refused to haul stones, you weren't just breaking a law, you were risking the unraveling of the universe.
That is heavy. So the lie turns exploitation into a religious obligation.
Exactly.
Fast forward a few millennia, and we see the exact same mechanic, but wrapped in legal paperwork rather than divine mythology. I'm talking about the donation of Constantine.
Ah, a truly audacious piece of fiction.
It really is. The sources detail this 8th century forgery claiming the Roman Emperor Constantine had legally signed over temporal power of the Western Roman Empire to the Pope.
Which was completely fabricated.
Entirely made up out of thin air. But it secured the papal states for centuries. It's like someone forging a billionaire's will today, using obvious anachronisms like, I don't know, casually mentioning a smartphone in a legal document from 1985.
Right.
But the bank accepts it anyway because it benefits their bottom line.
What's fascinating here is how the mechanics of that lie were eventually unraveled.
Yeah.
It took until 1440 for a Renaissance humanist named Lorenzo Valla to expose it. And he didn't do it with armies. He did it with early textual analysis, specifically a field called philology.
Wait, Philology, let me stop you there. What exactly does that look like in practice?
Philology is basically the study of how language and words evolve over time.
Okay.
The law looked at the Latin used in the donation document and proved that the vocabulary and grammar didn't even exist during Constantine's actual era.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he found words that were the equivalent of your 1985 smartphone analogy. It shows that challenging entrenched power requires specific intellectual tools.
But the tragedy is, by the time Vala exposed it, the power dynamic had already been established for hundreds of years.
Yep, the lie had already done its job.
We see this retroactive justification constantly. Look at the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs.
Right.
The sources show the Spanish claim that the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma believed Hernan Cortés was the returning god Quetzalcoatl, but they cooked that story up after the fact.
Precisely. It was a fabrication designed to justify an illegal, rogue military conquest.
Yeah.
By framing it as a divine destiny that the Aztecs supposedly willingly accepted, the conquistadors could sell their actions to the Spanish crown without facing charges of treason.
It absolves the conqueror.
Yeah.
Retroactive permission slip.
Exactly.
And these fictions literally drew the map of the world. Look at the legend of Prester John.
Oh, yeah.
A 12th century forged letter about a wealthy Christian priest king somewhere in the East. That single fake letter drove 300 years of European exploration and crusade policy.
They were mapping their entire foreign policy around a phantom. And, legal fabrications are just as potent in modern history.
Absolutely.
Consider the Dred Scott decision in the United States in 1857. Chief Justice Roger Taney entirely fabricated the Founding Fathers' original intent.
Falsely claiming that black people were never meant to be citizens.
Right. He just invented a historical narrative from thin air to legally protect the institution of slavery. He corrupted the Constitution itself.
It demonstrates that once you establish the right to interpret the law or claim divine mandate, you control reality.
You really do.
But let's move the timeline forward. Once you are sitting on the throne, securely in power, you inevitably face rivals.
Right. And you can't just execute your political rivals or attack your neighbors out of the blue.
No, you'd look like a tyrant.
You need to make them look like the aggressors. You need to manufacture a pretext.
Exactly. Let's look at royal usurpation. Richard III in 1483.
Yeah, he wanted the English throne, but his nephews, the famous princes in the Tower, were next in line. So, Richard fabricated a story about a marriage pre-contract made by his late brother.
Which means?
This legal fiction essentially declared his own nephews to be illegitimate bastards, which gave him the perfectly legal excuse to seize the crown.
And it completely mirrors what happened centuries earlier during the anarchy. Stephen of Blois broke his sworn oaths to support Matilda as the rightful queen by claiming his oaths were made under coercion.
A total legal fiction.
But it plunged England into 19 years of civil war.
The pretext gives followers a reason to fight without feeling like villains. But the mechanics of the pretext go far beyond English royalty.
Oh, definitely.
Look at the origins of the Sunni-Shia split in Islam in the 7th century. Muawiyah I used the genuine grievance of the murder of the previous caliph, Uthman, as a pretext to rebel against Ali.
Right.
Muawiyah didn't necessarily want justice for the murder. He wanted power. But using that specific pretext created the first fitna, the first Islamic civil war, and caused a permanent religious schism.
Okay, wait, this is the aha moment right here. I'm looking at these sources, and I'm realizing the most dangerous lies aren't complete fictions.
No, they're not.
Muawiyah used a real murder. The genius is that the lie is like 10% truth and 90% spin. The truth acts as the Trojan horse for the propaganda.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it, and the historical record backs you up entirely. Think about the Boston Massacre.
Classic example.
5 colonists are killed in a chaotic, messy street riot, but Paul Revere creates an engraving that turns it into a disciplined, unprovoked slaughter by British troops.
Firing into innocent bystanders.
Right. The event was real, but the narrative was spun propaganda.
The USS Maine is the exact same playbook. The ship really did explode in Havana Harbor in 1898.
That's the 10% truth?
Yeah. It was likely from an internal coal fire. But media titans like Hearst and Pulitzer spun in the 90% spin as a deliberate Spanish torpedo attack.
Just to spark the Spanish-American War. And Spain used the same tactics. In the Virginius affair, Spain fabricated piracy charges against a smuggling ship.
Just to execute American and British citizens.
Exactly, giving state murder the cover of law. But sometimes leaders don't even need an external enemy. They invent a threat entirely from within to justify purging their own ranks.
This is terrifying. Like in 1572, Catherine de' Medici invented a Protestant Huguenot coup to justify the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre.
Right.
She convinced the king they were about to be overthrown, which led to the slaughter of thousands of Protestants in the streets of Paris.
And Hitler used the exact same mechanic in 1934 during the Night of the Long Knives.
Oh, yeah.
He invented a treasonous plot by Ernst Röhm. Why? To justify purging his own SA stormtroopers and consolidating absolute power, it was a preemptive strike against a phantom coup.
And then there are the false flags, where a state literally stages an attack on itself.
Yeah.
Bismarck selectively edited the Ems dispatch, which was just a routine diplomatic telegram, to make it sound like a grave insult to both France and Prussia.
He deliberately engineered national outrage to trigger the Franco-Prussian War.
Or the Japanese Kwantung Army blowing up a tiny section of their own railway in 1931, the Mukden incident.
Right, and blaming Chinese dissidents to justify invading Manchuria.
And perhaps the most infamous, the Gleiwitz incident.
Oh, that one.
The SS took a murdered concentration camp prisoner, dressed him in a Polish military uniform, and left his body at a German radio station to claim Poland had attacked Germany.
I mean, I am struggling to understand how the public buys this so easily.
Well, I guess if the state controls the radio and the newspapers and presents a dead body as proof, what else is the public supposed to believe?
Exactly. The lie provides a narrative of self-defense, and that connects directly to our next major theme. Because it's one thing to trick your neighbor into a war.
Right.
It is another level of deception to commit horrific atrocities on a global scale while convincing the entire world you are actually on a humanitarian mission.
The benevolent mask? This is where the psychology of deception gets really dark.
It does. The language of benevolence serves a dual purpose. It doesn't just placate the international community.
Yeah.
It actually allows the perpetrators to evade moral accountability in their own minds. They tell themselves they are the saviors.
Let me ask you, listening to this, have you ever noticed how the most damaging corporate or political actions today are almost always wrapped in the most aggressively positive PR language?
Oh, totally.
Terms like restructuring for synergy when they really mean mass layoffs. That is the King Leopold playbook.
King Leopold II of Belgium is the ultimate example of this. In the late 19th century, he took personal ownership of the Congo Free State, a territory 76 times the size of Belgium.
It's massive.
And he turned it into a brutal rubber extraction camp reliant on slave labor and mutilation, resulting in millions of deaths.
But how did no one stop him? I mean, weren't there diplomats or journalists who saw what was happening?
Because of the mask. Leopold didn't pitch it as a colony. He pitched it to the world as an international philanthropic society. He claimed his presence in the Congo was an anti-slavery civilizing mission to uplift the local population. He hid the greatest atrocity of the era behind the language of charity.
And we see that identical rhetoric in American history.
Yeah.
Andrew Jackson pushed the Indian Removal Act, which resulted in the Trail of Tears.
Right.
But he didn't frame it to the public as ethnic cleansing. He claimed it was a benevolent measure to, quote-unquote, assimilate and protect Native Americans from encroaching white settlers.
It's the absolute core of Rudyard Kipling's poem, The White Man's Burden,
Yeah.
framing brutal colonial domination and resource extraction as a noble, self-sacrificing duty.
Like they're doing them a favor.
Right. The empire isn't exploiting you. The empire is exhausted from the hard work of civilizing you.
It's so pervasive that competing empires actually weaponize this benevolent language against each other.
Oh, definitely.
Look at the Spanish Black Legend. English and Dutch propagandists took Bartolomé de las Casas' actual true accounts of Spanish cruelty in the Americas.
Yeah.
And instead of saying colonialism is bad, they spun it to say the Spanish are uniquely evil, which means our Protestant empires will be uniquely virtuous by comparison.
Wow.
They used human rights abuses to justify their own violent colonial expansions.
It's a remarkable sleight of hand. But we have to ask, what happens when that benevolent mask drops?
Yeah.
When a society faces a sudden economic crash, a famine, or a failing war, the illusion of benevolence no longer holds the public's attention.
People panic. And when people panic, leaders need a scapegoat to consolidate their control through fear. Because if the public isn't afraid of a hidden enemy, they might start looking at the failures of a leader.
Precisely. Imagine you are living through complex, systemic chaos, a collapsed economy, or a lost war. The human brain struggles to process millions of interacting variables.
You want a simple answer?
We want a singular enemy to blame.
And that psychological vulnerability is what leaders exploit. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is the most devastating example in our sources.
It really is.
It was a crude forgery created by the Tsarist secret police in Russia. The Russian Empire was failing, so they fabricated a global Jewish conspiracy to deflect anger away from the Tsar.
Right.
And tragically, it later became the foundational text of Nazi ideology.
That kind of scapegoating has deep, repetitive roots. Go back to 1144, the blood libel in Norwich, England. They completely fabricated the idea of ritual murder, which launched centuries of anti-Semitic persecution.
It's horrific.
Or in 1678, Titus Oates, a disgraced cleric, entirely invented the popish plot. He claimed there was a secret Catholic conspiracy to assassinate King Charles II.
Totally made up.
A total lie, but it caused a 3-year public panic and led to the execution of dozens of innocent people.
So these lies work because they offer a neat, tidy narrative for why things are going wrong. We see it used against labor movements, too.
Oh, absolutely.
In the 1870s, the Pinkerton detectives and Pennsylvania coal barons completely fabricated the existence of a secret Irish terrorist society called the Molly Maguires.
Right.
They used this fake conspiracy to justify hanging union organizers who were simply demanding better wages.
If a state wants to permanently suspend civil liberties, they need an overwhelmingly terrifying conspiracy. Look at the Reichstag fire in 1933.
Yeah.
It was set by a lone Dutch communist, but Hitler immediately claimed it was the opening salvo of a massive Marxist coup.
And that gave him the excuse he needed.
That single narrative leap allowed him to legally suspend civil rights in Germany permanently.
Or to deflect from massive military failures. Imagine you're a German civilian in 1918. You've been told for years you are winning the war, and suddenly your leaders surrender.
You are desperate for an explanation that doesn't shatter your national pride.
Exactly. And the military leaders, Ludendorff and Hindenburg, provided it. They couldn't admit they lost on the battlefield due to strategic failure, so they invented the stab-in-the-back myth.
Falsely claiming that civilians and Jews had betrayed an otherwise undefeated army from within.
And sometimes, the public is just so primed to hate someone, they'll believe literally any conspiracy about them. Marie Antoinette was permanently destroyed by the affair of the diamond necklace.
Oh, the jewelry fraud.
Yeah, it was a massive financial fraud that she had absolutely nothing to do with. But because the public already viewed her as a symbol of excess, the lie stuck effortlessly.
Which leads us to a crucial turning point in our analysis. We've talked extensively about leaders lying to the public, lying to their enemies, and creating scapegoats.
Right.
But perhaps the most insidious lies are the ones leaders use to cover their own incompetence, or the lies they genuinely tell themselves.
The tragedy of self-deception. This is where it gets really complicated, because we aren't just looking at evil masterminds anymore. We are looking at leaders bending reality to avoid facing their own failures.
Think about Winston Churchill promising an easy victory at Gallipoli in World War I. He desperately wanted a quick end to the war, so he willfully ignored the hard intelligence about Ottoman defenses.
He lied to himself.
He did, which led to a catastrophic slaughter of Allied troops.
Or pure, unadulterated bluffs. The Monroe Doctrine in 1823 told European powers to stay out of the Americas. It was a complete bluff.
Yeah, the U.S. had virtually no navy to back it up at the time.
But Europe was distracted by their own internal conflicts, so the bluff worked and became a cornerstone of foreign policy. They projected power they didn't have.
And then there's Neville Chamberlain's desperate self-deception at Munich in 1938, claiming he had achieved peace for our time.
Ugh.
He wanted so badly to believe Hitler's promises that he completely ignored the overwhelming reality of fascist aggression.
The democracies did the exact same thing with the Spanish non-intervention agreement in 1936.
Oh, yeah.
They signed a piece of paper pretending they were keeping the peace in Spain while fully looking the other way as Germany and Italy bombed Spanish cities. They lied to themselves to avoid making hard, costly choices.
If we look closely at how states handle failure, you see how covering up incompetence creates a permanent legacy of institutional lying. Look at the Dieppe raid in 1942.
Oh, this one is infuriating.
It was a poorly planned, suicidal frontal assault by Allied forces on a fortified beach that ended in absolute disaster. But military commanders couldn't admit it was a botched plan.
So what did they do?
They rebranded it in the press as a necessary learning experience for D-Day to hide their own incompetence.
So when a modern CEO or politician today claims a massive, costly failure was actually a strategic learning opportunity, They are directly channeling the legacy of Dieppe, its institutional spin.
Precisely. And leaders will spin their own foundational principles when it suits them. Thomas Jefferson secretly believed the Louisiana Purchase was unconstitutional based on his own strict reading of the law.
Right.
But the deal was too good to pass up, so he buried his principles and lied to himself about the legal bounds of his office for expediency.
I'm still amazed by the warming pan baby conspiracy. Opponents of the Catholic King James II during the Glorious Revolution didn't want his newborn son to inherit the English throne.
Right. So they literally spread a rumor that the Queen's real baby had died, and a fake baby was smuggled into the birth chamber inside a warming pan.
It was an absurd, easily disprovable conspiracy theory.
But it gave them the political excuse they needed to illegitimize the heir.
State cover-ups really become an art form in these sources. The need to mask the reality of violence is universal. In 1819, British cavalry charged a peaceful crowd demanding voting rights in what became known as the Peterloo Massacre.
Oh, well, right.
The government immediately framed it as a violent armed insurrection to justify the slaughter of their own citizens.
The Soviet state apparatus elevated this to a science. They committed the Katyn massacre, executing thousands of Polish military officers in 1940, and they spent the next 50 years vehemently denying it.
Fabricating evidence to blame it on the Nazis.
Exactly.
Or look at the Bolsheviks in 1921 during the Kronstadt Rebellion. The sailors at Kronstadt were the very working-class heroes the Bolsheviks claimed to represent, but they were demanding basic democratic rights. Lenin and Trotsky couldn't admit that the workers were rebelling against the workers' state, so they labeled the sailors as white guard capitalist counter-revolutionaries to justify massacring them.
It's cognitive dissonance resolved by a bullet. Robespierre did it during the French Revolution with his cult of the supreme being. He tried to dress up the Reign of Terror and the mass guillotine executions as some sort of beautiful, rational civic awakening.
Even in the realm of finance, the mechanics are the same. The de Lesseps Panama scandal in the 1880s relied on massive systemic bribery of French politicians and journalists.
Yeah.
They did it to hide the fact that building a sea-level canal in Panama was an impossible engineering disaster that was killing thousands of workers and burning through investors' life savings.
In every single one of these cases, from the Pharaohs to Panama, the truth was viewed merely as an obstacle to maintaining power, reputation, or control.
It is. The truth is fragile, and as we've seen, often entirely powerless if a lie serves a pressing political, psychological, or military need.
Which brings us to the core realization of this entire deep dive. We've traced the mechanics of deception across thousands of years.
We really have.
We've seen how lies secure power, start wars, wear a mask of benevolence, create scapegoats, and cover up sheer incompetence.
And that leaves us with a rather chilling final thought to mull over. We might look at this history and think we are safer today.
Sure.
We think that because we have the internet, data, and modern fact-checking, we are immune. We think that just like Lorenzo Valla exposed the donation of Constantine using logic and philology, we can expose today's political fictions with a quick search.
But the sources tell a different story, don't they?
They do. I want you to remember the protocols of the Elders of Zion. The London Times, one of the most respected newspapers in the world, definitively exposed it as a plagiarism and a forgery in 1921.
They laid out the irrefutable proof for the entire world to see.
Yet the exposure didn't kill the lie. The people who wanted to believe it simply argued that the exposure itself was part of the conspiracy.
Wow, so the facts didn't matter because the lie was serving a psychological need for the believers.
Exactly. So I have to ask you, is the ultimate defense against a political lie really having better facts? Or is it recognizing the psychological vulnerability within ourselves that the lie is specifically engineered to exploit?
That is the real question to walk away with. Because until we realize why we so desperately want to believe the bronze plaques in that museum, we're going to keep falling for the forged ones. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep questioning the narratives around you, look closely at the plaques, and we'll see you next time.